The title of today's hearing is Expanding Choice and Increasing Supply, Housing Innovation in America. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit extraneous materials to the chair for inclusion in the record. I now recognize myself for 4 minutes for an opening statement. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for being with us today, and I very much look forward to hearing your testimony on the topic of innovation in housing. In our March hearing, we examined the broader issue of housing supply and its shortage. That problem takes many forms, but one aspect that I have observed in my district is an absence of what is referred to as quote-unquote workforce housing. According to data from the National Association of Home Builders, the median cost of constructing a new single-family home in 2024 was $428,215. For many Americans, a home built at that cost is simply not affordable. We have government programs that focus on housing subsidies for low and very low income people. We have market rate developments that are able to meet some of the demand for higher income people. What we need is housing that can meet the needs of all the people that fall somewhere in between those two worlds. Maybe it's someone who has been working in a factory for years, saving up so that they can make the transition from renting to owning a home. Maybe it's a young person that is new to the workforce and dreams of financial stability and freedom that comes from having a place to call your own. Whatever their situation, I'm sure all of us have seen the dire need for housing supply that meets the need of this population in all of our districts. I know some of you may look at this problem and clamor for greater subsidies or more market intervention by the federal government, but the reality is we don't need more subsidies. We just need more homes at prices people can afford. In this hearing, we will examine how different building technology and home types can contribute to a solution that meets the demand from this population. Whether it's manufactured homes, modular homes, or homes constructed using 3D printing, we need to explore all the options out there that can get housing built that is affordable to more Americans. In addition to better understanding how these technologies work and the potential savings they may provide, I hope this hearing will give us an opportunity to explore what barriers can become a hindrance to manufactured housing and modular housing development across the country. Manufactured housing is, by definition, built to a HUD code. And as a result, manufactured housing issues go directly through this committee's jurisdiction. 2 bills noticed for this hearing specifically address current barriers to greater adoption of manufactured housing across the country. Number 1, Congressman John Rose's expansion of attainable home ownership through Manufactured Housing Act would remove the requirement that manufactured homes be built on a permanent chassis. Number 2, I have a draft bill noticed to the hearing that would give HUD the authority to reject or approve manufacturing standards proposed by other regulators affecting manufactured homes. These proposals could go a long way towards removing some of the federal barriers that prevent greater utilization of manufactured homes. However, additional barriers exist that are worth exploring further. Zoning and land use policies at the state and local level, challenges with financing mortgages, and a general lack of understanding of these housing types can all contribute to challenges in their utilization in areas across the country. I'm excited to dig deeper into each of these issues today, and I look forward to our witnesses' testimony. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Cleaver, for 4 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing. The United States faces a severe housing shortage. In fact, it may well be our #1 domestic issue. Since the year 2000, growth in housing demand has far exceeded growth in housing supply. Housing costs have increased faster than household income, and access to affordable housing and home ownership options for American families has decreased. Unproduction of housing impacts every corner of the nation. This also includes rural areas and smaller cities who need affordable housing to attract businesses and ensure that residents can live affordably. The combination of a national supply shortage and the escalating cost of home construction is raising awareness of new construction processes, materials, and technologies that can deliver housing in an affordable way. I support housing that's safe, I support housing that is decent, and I support housing that is affordable. Safe, decent, and affordable housing by nature includes basic resident protections to ensure that housing does not become unsafe, indecent, and radically unaffordable. One example of housing innovation under consideration today is manufactured housing. I've spoken with the Manufactured Housing Institute, and I'm very, very interested in how we can work together to expand safe, decent, and affordable housing options that protect residents. More than 20 million Americans live in manufactured housing. Manufactured housing is typically used by low-income families, seniors on limited incomes, people with disabilities, and those living in rural areas and small towns. The next generation of manufactured housing is more affordable. It is faster to construct, and it can be built to be energy efficient with little waste due to factory precision. There is value in reducing barriers to the adoption of many forms of affordable housing innovation in a responsible way. That includes in urban areas like Kansas City, Missouri, which I represent, and like Little Rock, represented by the chair of this committee. But let me be clear. President Trump has put forward a skinny budget that would defund federal housing programs and threaten millions of Americans with housing instability in the middle of a housing crisis. No amount of innovation will offset the impact of the president's skinny budget if implemented or harmful executive actions. It is not a skinny budget, it is a starvation budget. The irony is that Congress is incoherently discussing how to increase affordable housing supply while discussing the elimination of key housing programs. This includes a 44% cut to HUD, including programs that directly support the adoption of housing innovation and supply. Additionally, tariffs, I agree with the Wall Street Journal, make building all types of housing more expensive. Democrats will continue to defend federal programs and put forward solutions to housing crisis. Senator Warnock, and I have introduced the American Housing and Economic Mobility Act, which would build nearly 3 million new housing units. I believe it is also the best interest of the country to find bipartisan agreement where possible. And I've appreciated the engagement of the chair of this legislation on a bipartisan interest. I look forward to today's hearing. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Hill, for 1 minute.
I thank Chairman Flood. It's no secret that parts of America are facing severe housing supply challenges. Recent estimates place this shortfall ranging from 2.3 to nearly 7 million housing units, which has contributed to a sharp increase in home prices. Specifically in my hometown of Little Rock, the median home price is up 11% just over the last year. This rapid price increase, combined with inflation's impact on financing costs, is putting home ownership out of reach for many hardworking American families. And that's what makes Chairman Flood's hearing today so important. We've got an opportunity to explore solutions to these housing challenges and provide consumers more choice. By embracing innovative housing solutions and removing barriers to outdated regulations, land use restrictions, and other financial barriers, we can make a difference. I thank Chairman Flood, Ranking Member Cleaver for their leadership on this issue. Look forward to our panel today and yield back the balance of my time.
The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Waters, for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Families across America are reeling from a growing housing and homelessness crisis. So it's very important we discuss expanding affordable housing through manufactured housing. And I want to thank Mr. Cleaver for his leadership and the work that he's been doing on this issue. But as usual, Republicans are talking out of both sides of their mouths. They say they want affordable housing, but support Trump's proposed budget that would cut $26 billion in rental assistance programs and defund key federal housing programs that keep families affordable housed. Meanwhile, new homes are projected to be $11,000 more expensive with Trump's dumb tariffs. If Republicans are serious, Democrats are ready to work on building affordable manufactured housing that is climate resistant, resilient, and shielded from predatory private investors. We're also ready to advance real solutions like my bill, the Housing Crisis Response Act, which would invest $150 billion to end the housing crisis for good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Cleaver. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Good morning to everyone. Today we welcome the testimony of Mr. Bill Boor, President and CEO of Cavco Industries and Chairman, Manufactured Housing Institute. Mr. Eric Schaefer is with us today, Chief Business Development Officer of Fading West. Dr. Andrew P. McCoy, the Director of the Virginia Center for Housing Research, Professor in the Department of Building Construction, and Associate Director of the Myers Lawson School of Construction at Virginia Tech. We also welcome today Mr. Colten Fleu, Senior Attorney at Mountain State Justice Incorporated. We thank each of you for taking the time to be here. Each of you will be recognized for 5 minutes to give an oral presentation of your testimony. Without objection, your written statements will be made part of the record. Mr. Boor, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your oral remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Flood, Ranking Member Cleaver, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Bill Boor, CEO of Cavco Industries. We're the third largest U.S. producer of factory-built homes. Last year, we built nearly 20,000 homes in 31 factories. We have 79 retail stores, a mortgage lending company, and an insurance company, all focused on manufactured housing. I also serve as chairman of the board of the Manufactured Housing Institute, the National Trade Association, representing all segments of our industry. Manufactured housing is the most affordable path to home ownership for millions of Americans. Our homes are built to a federal building code that ensures quality, safety, and weather resiliency. This year, our industry expects to build over 100,000 homes, accounting for 10% of all new single-family home starts. These homes are built by 36 American companies and delivered nationwide. This committee can help us keep costs low, encourage innovation, and expand financing options. My testimony today focuses on actionable steps Congress can take to increase the supply of affordable housing, and that's without taxpayer subsidies. First, clarify HUD's authority as sole regulator of manufactured housing. For over 50 years, HUD has been the sole federal regulator of manufactured home design, construction, and installation, ensuring consistent performance-based national standards that prioritize quality, safety, durability, and affordability. As the primary example of confusion created by a lack of regulatory clarity, the Department of Energy, under a 2007 law, attempted to impose energy standards on manufactured housing without recognizing how our homes are built in a factory and transported to site. The result, if implemented, would be a conflicting set of energy standards that undermine both HUD's role and housing affordability. Our industry has a proven track record of improving energy efficiency and is committed to continued progress, but that progress must come through HUD's established regulatory framework. Congress should pass legislation to reaffirm HUD's sole authority over all federal construction standards for manufactured homes. Relatedly, HUD and Congress should work to overcome local zoning and regulatory barriers to manufactured homes. Congress has attempted to overcome local and state zoning issues that purposely exclude manufactured homes. In 2000, Congress expanded HUD's preemption authority over local requirements, saying it should be, quote, broadly and liberally construed. MHI believes it's past time for HUD to update its 1997 policy statement, and Congress should direct them to do so. We are not asking for advantages relative to other forms of housing, just a level playing field so we can expand the supply of affordable homes. Next, modernize the chassis requirement for manufactured homes. Federal law requires manufactured homes to be built on a permanent chassis. This is an outdated standard rooted in the era of mobile homes. Today's manufactured homes are rarely moved once installed. Eliminating the chassis requirement would allow our industry to design homes with a lower profile that would improve curb appeal, and it would enable development of multi-story designs and other innovations. Next, expand financing options for manufactured homes. Affordable financing is critical to making home ownership accessible. Congress should direct FHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac to support buyers of manufactured homes through targeted actions. First, expand cross-mod lending programs. These programs should include single-section homes that meet all the other criteria of cross-mod homes. The only thing that limits the single-section home from being included is its size. It's basically an oversight. Next, ensure fair access to commercial loans for community operators. Commercial financing should be available to all community operators, not just nonprofits. Privately operated communities have a long track record of success with high resident satisfaction. Create effective home-only loan programs. Despite years of discussion, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and Ginnie Mae have failed to create a secondary market for home-only loans. Congress should require meaningful action to make these loans accessible and affordable. Access to affordable financing is not just a policy goal, it's a practical necessity for millions of American families. The manufactured housing industry is not asking for subsidies or preferential treatment. We're asking for sensible, clear regulations, fair access to locations that need affordable housing, and inclusion in federal homebuyer financing programs so we can do what we do best, build affordable, high-quality homes for American families. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Boor. Mr. Schaefer, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your oral remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Flood and Ranking Member Cleaver of the Subcommittee on Housing and Insurance for the opportunity to testify today on your hearing of housing innovation in America. I speak today to as an advocate for innovative solutions to our nation's persistent affordable housing crisis by using off-site modular construction. The hearing is timely, given the lack of affordable housing across the country caused by workforce shortages, supply chain disruptions, coupled with inflation, entitlement burdens, and design approval challenges. I am Eric Schaefer, Chief Business Development Officer of Fading West, located in Buena Vista, Colorado. Fading West began in 2016 with what we thought was going to be a one-time workforce housing project called The Farm, located in Buena Vista, before we ended up building our own factory almost 4 years ago. We found that modular manufacturing carries significant advantages over stick-built construction. I am here today because Fading West and the modular manufacturing industry firmly believes the U.S. Congress can have a role in helping the nation's home building industry to continue to innovate and thereby be a partner in resolving the housing shortages across the country. Off-site modular construction offers a compelling alternative. This method involves manufacturing individual housing modules in a controlled factory setting. These modules, complete with electrical wiring, plumbing, interior finishes, are then transported and assembled on site. So 90% of the home ends up being built in the factory. Fading West has integrated the entire construction value stream by combining real estate development, modular manufacturing, and the general contracting to reduce waste and improve quality and speed. We can build homes 10 to 20% less expensive by reducing waste from 30% to less than 5%. And by standardizing processes and products similar to a car manufacturer, we increase volume, which brings down cost. We can complete homes 50 to 70% quicker than traditional construction. A typical Fading West home is built in less than 8 working days in our factory and then completed at the site in less than 30 days. So from start to finish, a new home can be completed in less than 40 days compared to the greater than 9 months for traditional construction. Last September and October, Fading West built 80 homes, actually over 80 homes in our Colorado factory, put them on trucks and trucked them to Seattle and then barged them to Maui, where homes were completed for families affected by the Lahaina fires. So by January of this year, all families had moved in. From the start of production to completion, the whole process took less than 4 months. Fading West recently partnered with Vail Valley Habitat for Humanity to build 16 homes for teachers. Built the usual way, Habitat would have only been able to complete either 2 or 3 homes instead of 16. It took Fading West 1 month to build the homes in the factory, allowing the teachers to move in for the beginning of this school year. These are just a couple of success proof of concept projects that have been completed using modular. To fully leverage the potential of off-site modular construction, we need your support. This includes, first, as a long-term solution, mandate the harmonization of regional building codes to streamline the housing construction regulatory process. An example of this, last week, Governor Polis of Colorado signed a regional codes bill to reduce the number of building codes around our state, dropping it from 300 down to under 10. Number two, invest in research and development to support modular design, materials, and new construction techniques. And third, to provide grants and low-interest loans to the supply side, using federal funds to help build modular manufacturing facilities to increase housing supply instead of just subsidizing the demand-side projects. Off-site modular construction is not just a trend. It is a viable and innovative solution that can significantly impact the affordable housing crisis. By embracing this approach, we can build more homes faster and at a lower cost and with a higher quality. Let us work together to unlock the potential of modular construction and provide safe, decent, and affordable housing for all Americans. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Dr. McCoy, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your oral remarks.
I want to first thank Chairman Flood and Ranking Member Cleaver and the subcommittee for inviting me here today. It is an honor to be here and discuss the role of housing innovation in driving the past and future of our industry. The space race was one of the biggest boons of the 20th century to housing technology. It advanced materials like insulation that we now take for granted. In the 21st century, industrialized construction methods will build faster with greater precision and less waste. Artificial intelligence will automate and accelerate processes while reducing delays, errors, and costs. Smart materials will transform the parts of housing. Emerging innovations like digital twins, real-time construction monitoring, and data processing will offer predictive control and assurance for quality, costs, operations, and maintenance. Importantly, these technologies will not remove the need for people. They will expand opportunities for skilled work, increase accessibility, and empower a new generation of construction professionals with tools, support, and control. In many ways, home building technologies are a public event. The processes of U.S. home building are visible to the public every day. Innovation creates benefits for consumers, and the knowledge created by one firm creates value for other firms and their customers. Our policy dilemma is that the nation is not reaping economic and social returns from innovation when the industry is not innovating as much as possible. We tend to think of housing as an economic indicator, while we need to see housing innovation as an economic driver. Over time, several milestones have influenced the role of technology in the housing industry. The U.S. government actively began supporting housing advances in technology through the housing policy in 1949's American Housing Act. In 1970, the Housing and Urban Development Act provided additional authority to improve the physical quality of housing through technological change, effectively mandating housing technology as public policy. Examples of public programs that concentrated on housing innovation nationally include the 1962 Civilian Industrial Technology Program and late 1960s Operation Breakthrough Program, and the 1990s Partnership for Advancing Technology in Housing, or PATH. Lessons learned include the need for public-private partnerships, the impacts of local regulation and fragmentation, and the need for more funding options specific to this industry. More recently, the 2008 financial downturn led to a dispersion of trades away from construction and resulted in a decade of underproducing new homes. The percentage of new construction, which provides the majority of housing's economic impacts, jobs, materials, services, only recently recovered. Over the last decade, labor shortages, a lack of available land, cost inflation, supply disruptions, and rising financial costs have resulted in few options for the median home buyer. As we heard earlier, the National Association of Home Builders estimates that 103.5 million households, or 77% of U.S. households, are not able to afford the $428,000 cost of a median-priced home. Attention now has shifted to innovation. By example of the Commonwealth of Virginia, local agencies and governments are implementing zoning reforms, funding options, and regulatory reform that reduce barriers to innovation. The Virginia Housing Development Authority has particularly leaned in. For example, their qualified allocation plan scoring incorporates points for developers who use innovation in their low-income housing tax credit developments, making them more competitive. VHDA has also created community innovation grants up to $500,000 that de-risk the adoption process for builders willing to try new technologies. Our 3D concrete printing program has recently benefited, producing 4 workforce housing homes and starting on an additional 10. Virginia's Department of Housing and Community Development also recently modified parts of the building code to facilitate the use of modular housing, getting out of the way and making these technologies more accessible to the market. The city of Danville in Southside Virginia recently changed its zoning to allow for manufactured and modular housing units to reduce costs and provide options. Also, Governor Youngkin's permitting dashboard at the Department of Environmental Quality is an example of streamlining and speeding up process. Nevertheless, the cumulative results is persistent underproduction. The path forward will require coordinated partnerships and investment, regulatory modernization, workforce development, innovative financing, and cross-sector collaboration. Construction technology is especially compelling right now because it doesn't replace human workers, it amplifies them. Let me say that again. Construction technology is especially compelling right now because it does not replace human workers, it amplifies them. Innovations like augmented reality for training, robotic assistance in repetitive tasks, and digital project coordination. For example, a framer using layout tools with augmented reality can complete work faster and with fewer errors. The goal isn't to automate people out of housing, but to build better industry around them. It is time to harness these tools for progress in the housing industry. In doing so, home building technologies could expand from a public event
Gentleman's
to a
time has
public
expired.
opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fleu, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your oral remarks.
Chairman Flood, Ranking Member Cleaver, members of the subcommittee, on behalf of Mountain State Justice, thank you for inviting me to testify today regarding manufactured housing. I'm a senior attorney at MSJ, a nonprofit legal services provider in West Virginia. We exclusively represent low-income people at no cost to them. Since 1996, we have served thousands of homeowners of manufactured housing in danger of losing their homes or losing their homes and their land from predatory lending practices. We also represent these homeowners living in unsafe and unhealthy environments due to conditions of their home or damages from natural disasters. This testimony is also on behalf of the National Consumer Law Center and its low-income clients. In West Virginia, we are proud to have the highest rate of homeownership in the nation. We maintain that level of homeownership while possessing the 49th lowest average household income. It's no coincidence that West Virginians occupy manufactured housing at more than twice the national average. These homeowners are overwhelmingly focused on fixed incomes: the elderly, veterans, and the disabled. Those not on fixed incomes are working families struggling to make ends meet. Yet, these homeowners face widespread abuses in loan financing and systemic problems with community conditions. I want to share a couple of these folks' stories with you and some recommendations gleaned from my experience. But please remember this: manufactured homes are fundamentally different than stick-built homes. Manufactured homes, also called mobile homes, are not so mobile. They have a finite lifespan, and moving them can be cost prohibitive if they can be moved at all. Manufactured homes depreciate like cars. Manufactured homes are a vital source of housing, but they are not a wealth-building tool. It's a fact we urge you to keep in mind as you look to expand access to this important housing. The first case I want to share involves a leased land community, a mobile home park. Specifically, 5 mobile home parks totaling more than 640 home sites in Mercer County, West Virginia, that was bought by a hedge fund for investment. For quick background, Mercer County is in the coal fields of southern West Virginia. The median household income is under $48,000 a year, yet 70% of the housing units in the county are still owner-occupied. One of these owner-occupied houses belonged to Mr. and Mrs. P. 6 years ago, they cashed out their meager savings, bought a home for $30,000, and moved into one of these 640 lots. The entire time they were there, they paid $300 a month for rent and got by with their Social Security income. Other residents of these communities include Miss R and her husband, who ran a small business, averaged about $42,000 a year in take-home pay, paid $225 a month in lot rent. Miss V, who'd been living on one of these lots with her for 14 years, was providing around-the-clock care for her adult disabled son and was paid through the Medicaid waiver program. She also paid $225 a month for lot rent. But when the hedge fund consolidated its new investments, it issued notices of rent increases, just 60 days warning and time to hit just before Christmas. The rent increases were steep: 75% for Mr. and Mrs. P, $300 a month to $525. 120% for Miss R. She went from $225 a month to $495. 133% for Miss V and her disabled son, an increase from $225 a month to $525. Each one of these families were told to pay the new amount or there would be an eviction filed. And at the same time, the landlord neglected the community upkeep, leading to conditions such as a septic tank overflow onto community land. There is no happy ending to this story. Had the hedge fund provider provided proper notice to the residents, most states have no specific protections for lot rent increases or neglect in community conditions. Like Mr. and Mrs. P, the residents invest tens of thousands of dollars in these homes that sit on rented land without any assurance of security. In my written remarks, I also share the story of Mr. and Mrs. A, who fell victim to a bait-and-switch financing scheme, trapping them in a loan that they could not afford and jeopardizing the loss of both their home and their land. Without meaningful competition among lenders for manufactured home purchases, the potential for exploitation of buyers, again, overwhelmingly the elderly, the disabled, and veteran communities. Expanding manufactured housing market needs greater GSE backing of loans to ensure sustainable financing, including for those living in older homes and in manufactured communities. These programs also must include tenant protections to protect both residents and lenders. Thank you for the opportunity again to speak with you today, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fleu. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Before I start my questions to our witnesses, I want to recall a quick story that helps frame my interest in manufactured housing in particular. Last year, I heard about a new development of manufactured homes in Hagerstown, Maryland. The developer was working in partnership with Freddie Mac. Each one of these homes was built on fee simple owned individual lots. From what I had heard, these homes didn't fit the mold of what I imagined a manufactured home community would look like. It was not the manufactured homes of the 1970s. These were the kind of homes that a small family could be proud of, and yet they were going on the market for fairly low cost relative to stick-built homes. There were curbs, there were gutters, there were trees, there were driveways. Interested, I organized a group of Nebraskans and all the housing groups I could think of to go see the development. We chartered a bus, we went up to Maryland with the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority, local builders, and local nonprofits to check out the development. Sure enough, the homes looked as advertised. They weren't big or glamorous, but they were nice, solid homes that you would not have known they were manufactured homes if you weren't told. In fact, I was so sure that I wasn't looking at a manufactured home, I got underneath one of the homes and I saw the chassis. I could imagine a young couple moving into one of those homes to start a family, and I could imagine them beaming with pride, kids running around in the neighborhood next to a playground the first day they get the keys to their new house. While they won't fix everything, I do think there's potential here for some of these development types to be part of a broader housing supply solution in this country. Mr. Boor, manufactured housing is built to a national standard under the HUD code. How can Congress and HUD better leverage this existing code to expand the use of manufactured homes in federally funded affordable housing projects?
Thank you, Chairman Flood. And I appreciate the story. We're proud of the homes we're building, so thanks for that. A lot of it's what I tried to outline. I mean, I think expanding affordable housing is really a game of expanding the playing field under the HUD code. And so doing things like removing the chassis allows us to innovate, and that innovation will lead to us developing products, for example, that can go into urban infill, which is an area our industry traditionally has not penetrated. And so those kind of things, the financing that we talked about, if we can get home-only financing through the GSEs, that reduces the monthly cost for a buyer and makes more homes affordable. So that's a huge opportunity. At the other end of the extreme, some of the cross-mod homes we're doing are probably similar to what you saw. And currently, for no reason I can understand, multi-section homes that meet that criteria fit, but single-section homes that are just smaller, still meeting the criteria, don't qualify under cross-mod. And so that seems like an oversight to me. I'd like to see that changed. All of these things grow the playing field, grow the opportunity for us to innovate, and will allow us to provide more homes for families.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schaefer, can you describe how modular manufacturing can reduce home costs, and roughly how much savings could a home buyer expect to see with a modular home relative to a stick-built home?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Flood. So what we are seeing, again, it's speed to market. So we have 18 workstations in our factory. So again, imagine a Toyota car factory. The boxes move from station to station. About 90% of the home is built in the factory. So these are very high quality, built to the International Building Code. These are put on permanent foundations. So high quality, energy efficient. To your point earlier, architecturally interesting. We want to build homes that people who are moving into them are proud to live in them. And then the on-site work is dramatically reduced. It is set on a permanent foundation, as I said, and then about 30 days until the final CO. So the savings come kind of in 2 or 3 ways. First, it is the speed, so the...
And before you go there, I have one more question for Mr. Boor before my time runs out. I don't mean to cut you off, but Mr. Boor, what are the risks to affordability and access if other federal agencies like Department of Energy impose conflicting standards without HUD's coordination or oversight?
Yeah, at a high level, I think the issue is those agencies don't always understand our process. So they're myopically going after a given improvement that they're viewing, and yet HUD has a more robust, holistic process that considers those energy advancements in this case, but relative to affordability. The DOE rules would drive the costs up considerably for our home buyers.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Schaefer, since I apologize again for having cut you off, I would ask that you respond to the rest of my question for the record so that I can make it part of the record for this hearing.
Absolutely. So again, how
Unfortunately, I have to cut myself off again because I only have 5 minutes. So. But I appreciate you very much. Thank you. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Cleaver, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of want to follow up in that same direction. I'd like for Mr. Fleu, if you would, you're familiar with CDBG and the home program, I believe. These are critically important programs, and they are the 2 largest federal sources of flexible funding used by states and federal and local governments to preserve, rehabilitate, and in some cases actually develop manufacturing and housing. These programs support infrastructure upgrades, housing rehabilitation, land acquisition, and a number of other critical improvements in manufactured housing communities. Now, these programs have been targeted, unfortunately, and for me, painfully, despite their role in addressing affordability and improving conditions in underserved areas. Do you see, as I do, the negative impact these programs being cut would have on what I think most of us in this room are interested in trying to develop?
Thank you, Ranking Member Cleaver. I do see that. I do agree with the Ranking Member. I'd actually urge that these programs should be expanded, and funds should be available to more communities to improve the conditions.
Thank you. The ability, I think, of us to get something done will depend on our ability to work jointly, and I think there is, as I hope you can see, some bipartisan support for the new innovative ways in which we can reduce costs to build decent housing for our constituents. When renters are evicted, they typically leave the unit behind. In contrast, manufactured homeowners face a far more complex situation, probably legal maneuvering would be involved, but they must either sell their home or relocate to another site. And during COVID-19, the market for manufactured homes declined sharply. In the case where the manufactured homeowners cannot find buyers, they have little resources and may just leave the home in some kind of a residential area or in a park. In many states, these manufactured homes are considered abandoned property after 30 days, to which landlords can take over the titles and lease them to new tenants. What kind of protection, to any of you, what kind of protection should we develop to protect those homeowners?
If I may, Ranking Member Cleaver, Unfortunately, I think that that problem that you've identified is a state law issue. What we see, besides just the abandoned property, we see storage fees assessed when the resident has to leave their home. And the eviction process in West Virginia is no different for an owner of a manufactured home in a rented land community than from an apartment. So they leave behind and they end up forfeiting the largest asset that they own oftentimes. But unfortunately, as I say, these eviction laws, landlord-tenant laws are usually state law issues, and so it will take really a 50-state strategy, I believe.
In other words, Congress has to come together and agree to what Chairman Ford and I say. They must do what we said.
That's right.
To fix this. Everybody? Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. The chairman of the full committee, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thanks to the panel, very good testimony. Mr. Boor, really appreciated your testimony, and I was particularly interested in the cost you outlined, the flexibility, the regulatory agenda you outlined. I hope that we can do something to propose that. I was a staffer on the Housing Subcommittee in 1983, and we had the exact same testimony. So technology has advanced, and innovation has advanced, but apparently HUD and the regulatory system is stuck in the 70s on this matter. Would you agree with that?
I think there's some very specific actions that could be taken, and they don't seem that complex to me, but that's outside of this city, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'd like your views on the idea of this to have a chassis required to be in a manufactured home is a 50-year-old idea. It seems ridiculous to me.
Right.
Particularly considering Mr. Schaefer's good testimony on modular construction generally. So tell me a couple of success stories in urban areas and multi-story. Let me let you start, Bill, with you and comment on it, and then turn to Mr. Schaefer.
Success stories of manufactured housing in urban areas?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really an untapped market opportunity. Our homes have traditionally gone into rural areas because of the zoning challenges we talked about earlier. But what we've seen is where affordability is the absolute worst, that's where municipalities are starting to lower the barriers. We've seen that in some small towns. Martinsville, Virginia, we had a project that was aimed at home ownership for people with average incomes of $17 an hour. There was a variety of agencies got involved in that, but then you take it to the other extreme. LA County has done a tremendous amount of work to open up the opportunity for factory-built solutions. In that case, ADUs were one of the solutions that they've really grabbed onto. So we've shown that our products can penetrate those and increase affordable housing in traditionally or non-traditional markets.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer, could you comment on that too, please?
Yeah, a great example is in the town of Breckenridge, who acted as the developer for this project. There was nowhere for the workforce to live, so we built 60 apartment units just a block from Main Street. If you've been skiing there, you know exactly where that is. And land was donated, which allowed some affordability.
It's not
Of those 60 units, 1,100 people applied for the lottery to get
Okay, well, it doesn't
those
sound like
units.
that.
So you can just see the incredible need for workforce housing, especially in ski and mountain towns.
I was taken by your testimony as well, where you talked about $93,000 in regulatory costs per unit, meaning about 24% of the median home price in the country. That's mind-blowing to, I think, this committee. I hope it is. I hope that's flabbergasting to people on this committee.
Yeah, one of my lines that I use quite often is the word affordable and housing should never be used in the same sentence. There's no such thing.
Yeah. And you also referenced, and Bill did in his testimony as well, which is so much of this, that we've heard this testimony for years, is a state and local driven set of barriers. Those costs are mostly state and local. The barriers to creative uses and density rates, obviously in urban areas. And that comes from, you say in your testimony, 43,096 jurisdictions that all have different building codes, different zoning requirements, different, not in my backyard. Is there a model city or county that you think is outstanding on this issue that we could share? Mr. Boor, go ahead and start.
Well, I'd answer in a different way. I think that's the beauty of the HUD code. The HUD code provides a federal code that, in concept, if we meet that federal code, we can place those homes anywhere. And HUD has preemptive authority. And one of the actions I outlined was Congress should point to HUD and say, update your policy statement, exert your preemptive authority so that there's a stronger statement from the federal government about not disallowing HUD code homes.
Yep. Anybody else want to talk about that? Mr.
Yeah,
Schaefer?
I can just comment. So there was over 300 building codes in our state. So again, to use the car analogy, that would mean a Camry would be built 300 different ways. It would cost $200,000 if cars were built or governed the same way that houses were. So what we've done in our state, and this was just signed last Thursday, was to reduce those codes to regional codes. So the coldest areas will have a different building code, obviously, than the
Thank you very
plains.
much.
Yep.
Very useful testimony. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from California, Mrs. Waters, who is also the ranking member of the full Financial Services Committee, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Fleu, in your testimony, you noted that private investors acquiring manufactured housing communities often fail to comply with state laws that require that they honor existing leases and provide advance notice before increasing rents. This violation leaves residents vulnerable to sudden cost increases and housing instability. Can you speak more about how common these violations are and what tools, whether regulatory or legislative, are needed to ensure that lease protections and notice requirements are enforced in manufactured housing communities? Are you talking about preempting state laws and doing something from the federal level? What are you thinking about?
Thank you for the question. The way I would see federal law preempting state law, if you will, if the GSE-backed funding would expand and allow owners of homes that are not converted to real property, so they remain personal property loans, if the GSEs would provide funding for those loans and provide within that funding requirement certain rules and regulations which would have to be complied with by communities, that would go some distance, I think, to setting a baseline standard.
That makes good sense. Even as communities across the country struggle with severe housing shortages, local governments continue to use discriminatory zoning and land use regulations to block the development of placement of manufactured homes. These restrictions are often rooted in outdated and stigmatizing beliefs about manufactured housing and the people who live in it, making it nearly impossible to expand this affordable housing option in many areas. How have exclusionary zoning practices limited access to the use of manufactured housing, and how, again, can federal government help push communities to adopt zoning reforms?
Congresswoman, I really am not qualified to speak to your question. In West Virginia, we have very few zoning laws, and so I am not the proper witness, I think, to answer your question.
You're absolutely correct. Okay, this is something that our city councils and mayors have to deal with in zoning, and it's a big political problem. Let me go on. Manufactured housing communities are often on the front lines of increasingly frequent climate disasters such as hurricanes, floods, and wildfires, yet they face some of the biggest barriers to recovery. Many live in homes that are decades old and not built to resiliency standards. Others struggle to access FEMA assistance due to land tenure issues or documentation barriers. Too often, these residents are left behind when federal recovery funds are distributed. What changes are needed within FEMA and HUD to ensure manufactured housing, residents receive equitable disaster assistance, and that federal investments prioritize resilience and preservation of their homes in these communities? I guess you would say that's what we should be thinking about. We should have some answers to that, but maybe you can help us out with that.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. The discrimination between personal property homes and real property homes, I think everyone on this panel would probably agree, is really a distinction that no longer is accurate. And I think that the Congress and the agencies should work toward an even playing field for all homeowners, whether they own the land the home sits on or not.
Well, thank you very much. I would just like to say to you and perhaps to the other witnesses here today, this is an issue that could get bipartisan support. But in doing that, we must recognize the experiences we have had and clean it up and make sure that it's available and that the money is there. If we do that, I think we can move this issue, and it's needed desperately in this country. We've got to get rid of homelessness, and the unhoused people expect us to come up with answers, but let's not be shy about it. Let's get together and say we want the money, we want the assistance, we want the care that should be given to manufactured housing, just as it is expected for everybody in this country. So I'm looking forward to us being able to do that, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Rose, who is arguably our subject matter expert on the majority side and passionate about manufactured housing, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Flood, and thank you, Ranking Member Cleaver, for holding this important hearing, and thank you to all of our witnesses for taking time out of your schedules to be with us today. It is no secret that we are facing a serious housing shortage in this country. I hear from my constituents back in the 6th District of Tennessee all the time about their difficulties locating affordable housing. I dare say my colleagues hear the same story. In many areas of our nation, starter homes simply do not exist at an affordable price. So I applaud Chairman Flood's leadership and focus on increasing the housing supply, and I appreciate that a discussion draft of my bill, the Expansion of Attainable Home Ownership through Manufactured Housing Act of 2025, has been attached to this hearing. My bill would remove the statutory requirement that all manufactured homes be built on a permanent chassis. Mr. Boor, I appreciate that the Manufactured Housing Institute supports passage of the Expansion of Attainable Home Ownership through Manufactured Housing Act of 2025. Can you discuss why it is so important to remove the statutory requirement that manufactured homes be built on a permanent chassis?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I think this bill represents a true expansion of the scope of housing that can be covered under the HUD code, and we've talked about the advantages of the HUD code generally across the country. So we will, once this bill's passed, we will still have homes built on chassis because there's obviously a place for that. But now we've got the opportunity to innovate in ways where the home can be brought down, the curb appeal can be approved, we can go multi-story. We can do a lot of innovation that particularly will allow us to overcome some of the hesitance about placing our homes in urban and suburban environments.
I completely agree, and I think Ranking Member Waters was correct when she said that removing the stigma attached to manufactured housing is a big part of the task in front of us. So, I think this gives us a chance to move forward and realize the potential of what manufactured housing can do to increasing home ownership affordability. Mr. Boor, my office has worked extensively with the Manufactured Housing Institute on the bill that is attached to today's hearing to remove the permanent chassis requirement. One of the issues that we have focused on is ensuring that this bill does not impact the financing of manufactured homes. Do you believe that the bill attached to this hearing strikes the right balance of ensuring removal of the permanent chassis requirement while also making sure that the financing of manufactured homes is not adversely affected?
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. I think the first step is your bill, and then and we've already started this process within the industry, we're going to have to sync up state law to that bill so that the financing concerns can be alleviated. So there's a lot of work to be done afterwards, but you'll start the ball rolling.
And do you believe that that state work can happen quickly enough to usher along this transformation?
I believe it'll be a snowball. I think there'll be some really quick, easy wins there, and once some states are doing it, other states are going to quickly conform.
And Mr. Boor, I'm intrigued by the cross-mod concept and product. Could you elaborate on what a cross-mod home is and what the new single-section cross-mod product entails? Additionally, how can this housing innovation make home ownership more attainable for Americans?
Yeah, cross-mod is a term we use really to sync up with the Fannie and Freddie programs that say if a home meets certain criteria, it can be appraised against site-built comps. And that's a big deal, right? That recognizes that the provider of money says that our homes, from a quality perspective, are equal to site-built homes, which they are. So the issue that I raise, which I think is a pretty straightforward fix, is that right now those programs only cover, only insure homes that are multi-section. These homes have certain characteristics from the factory, and they also have certain characteristics at the site to qualify for this financing. And I believe it's an oversight not to allow smaller homes that qualify under this criteria to also qualify. And so I think it's a pretty straightforward change that will expand the concept of cross-mod home availability.
And Dr. McCoy, do you feel that single-section cross-mod has the potential to make home ownership attainable for more Americans?
I'm not sure I can answer that from my perspective and my expertise, but I can also say that one of the things that we talk about with innovation is that the residential construction industry is not necessarily very innovative. But when we look closely, we see that these are all innovations. Everything we're talking about is an improvement, and it's something that can help with getting more housing to more people that need it.
Well, thank you. My time's expired. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Presley, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Housing is a fundamental human right. Housing and affordability is the #1 issue I hear about from my constituents. Adding insult to injury, Trump is proposing a cut to rental aid assistance by 40%, essentially ending Section 8, and has already canceled contracts that support affordable housing. Trump is putting profits over people, worsening our housing crisis, and we need Congress to tackle zoning reform. Exclusionary zoning is a national problem and has a deep history in my district, the Massachusetts 7th. In fact, in the early 20th century, Boston adopted zoning codes that explicitly restricted where Black and immigrant families could live. Redlining, disinvestment, and segregation concentrated poverty in some neighborhoods while hoarding wealth in others. And today that legacy lives on. Zoning regulations in Boston are so contradictory and complex, in fact, that what would take a day and less than $100 to be approved in another city takes $10,000 in more than 6 months in the city of Boston. And there's abundant research showing exclusionary zoning perpetuates housing scarcity, economic segregation, unequal school systems, and disparate health outcomes. Dr. McCoy, I'd like to begin with you. For folks watching this hearing who may not be steeped in housing policy, can you explain the difference between single-family zoning and multifamily zoning? And how does that difference affect the overall supply and affordability of housing?
Thank you for the question. Well, I came prepared to talk about technology, but I can do my best to try to expand a little bit on what you're asking. Single-family zoning would typically be restricted to certain size of a footprint of the building on a lot, and would restrict certain uses of that building, and would ensure that anyone who purchased that building was restricted to that over time. Multifamily typically is something that we're going to use in a more dense situation where we need to have multiple units on top of each other or organized on the site, and of course it has its own different uses that it's restricted to.
Thank you. In Boston, more than 80% of residential land is still zoned exclusively for single-family homes or low-density housing. And we know that zoning has never been neutral. Mr. Fleu, in your legal advocacy work, can you elaborate on how zoning has been used historically as a mechanism of segregation and displacement, and what role you see Congress playing in reversing that legacy while still respecting local governance?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Again, I'm not the best witness to answer questions regarding zoning because in my state we have so few zoning laws. I certainly recognize the conditions that the Congresswoman's identified, and I see those perpetuated in my own state, not by zoning laws, but by convention. But I can't address the question specifically.
All right, then, well, let me pose a question to all of our witnesses today. Please raise your hand if you believe Congress should consider tying certain federal housing infrastructure funds to local zoning reform. All right, let the record reflect that all 4 of our witnesses raised their hand, and I agree. Congress can't wait any longer. We need to lift bans on multifamily housing, reduce minimum lot sizes, and modernize outdated code that limits supply. Because if we're going to invest federal dollars into housing and infrastructure, we need to ensure those dollars aren't being undermined by local rules that drive prices up. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Lawler, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. One of the most common concerns I hear from my constituents is affordability of housing. With mortgage rates near their highest since the turn of the millennium, a limited housing supply in many communities, and broader affordability concerns across the last several years, it is perhaps the most difficult time to purchase a home in our region's history. At the heart of this crisis is supply. We are millions of units underbuilt in this country and simply not building enough, and certainly not fast enough. Last year, I introduced the Revitalizing America's Housing Act, which calls for a wide-ranging series of bipartisan reforms and policies that would, amongst other goals, reframe how we're treating prefabricated homes in order to incentivize construction and reduce unaffordability. Dr. McCoy, what role do prefabricated homes play in addressing housing shortfalls in our developed nations around the globe?
In our developed nations around the globe?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the question. So I guess what I would answer is I advocate for a deep bench on this. We need many different options. We have a lot of capacity in this country, and we've lost some capacity, especially in terms of manufactured housing that we can bring back, right? So in terms of prefabricated options, it is growing, and we've seen a lot of growth in this. Mr. Schaefer can attest to that. And it's a very viable option for how we can get housing on the ground quickly.
So in comparison to countries like Sweden and Japan in particular, when you look at America's housing market, what limitations do you see to the industry reaching max capacity and scale on the regulatory and economic levels?
I see, okay. I'm not certain of the type of regulations, for example, that you have in Japan versus Sweden. I think in some ways what we've seen is a perception problem, and that's something that we really need to work on and make a national priority, is how do we create work against the perception that somehow the buildings that are built as modular or are not built on site, for example, that they have less quality in some way, which is not true from my experience and from our studies.
Mr. Schaefer, what role does building code complexity add to our current housing supply gap, and how could the greater use and acceptance of prefabricated homes help reduce that gap?
Thank you, Congressman, for your question. Yeah, I would say, first of all, again, as we've mentioned, it's almost $100,000 just in entitlement fees to get to the point where you can build a home. So we're already starting from behind. So streamlining those, less building codes per state, go to regional codes. What that would allow us then is to build faster, and if you build faster, then the cost comes down.
Great. And what other government barriers might exist at the local, state, or federal level that prevent modular housing from reaching their full potential?
I would say, again, the higher density, some of the things that we've already heard, that would change things. If the lot sizes are smaller, then you can get more homes, let's say. For instance, in the farm development that we did, we were able to get 10 homes per acre, which then dropped the price of the homes, because we did 5 plexes and single-family homes, down to the 80 to 120 area median income. So shrinking density or increasing density would be a tremendous help.
Thanks. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Torres, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Boor, you began your testimony with the following statement, quote, "We're not here today asking for subsidies." And then toward the end of your opening statement, you proceeded to ask for an expansion of the 22F HUD loan program, which kind of sounds like a subsidy to me because it means the government would have to take on the risk. We're bearing the risk and we're subsidizing that risk. So it feels like subsidies for me, but not for thee. You testified that public policy and regulation can be a barrier to cost-effective, affordable housing construction. I share that view. Do you believe that Trump tariffs fall into that category?
Could you explain roll into that category? I'm sorry.
Do you believe the Trump tariffs raise the cost of housing construction materials, which in turn raise the cost of housing construction, which in turn raises the cost of housing itself?
To the extent our costs are increased, which, I will say that we import materials that go into our homes, electrical components. We ship homes with appliances that come from overseas. So to the extent tariffs increase and inflate those products, that drives up costs for sure. And I can't deny or wouldn't deny, I would completely agree that
It was absent from your testimony, but if we're going to speak about barriers to cost-effective, affordable housing construction, the elephant in the room is the Trump tariff regime, which is not manufacturing housing, it's manufacturing housing shortages.
We should work on all these problems.
I'm an evangelist for the housing abundance movement and a proponent for housing innovation, land use reform, modular construction. The more innovation, the more reasonable regulatory reform, the merrier. But housing innovation is a supplement to, not a substitute for, housing investment. And if you're advocating for housing disinvestment, you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Mr. Fleu, is it fair to say that housing is a priority for most Americans?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So housing is a priority for the American people, but it's not a priority for Congress. The HUD budget is over $70 billion. The overall federal budget is $7 trillion. Housing is a mere 1% of the overall federal budget. And Donald Trump wants to take that meager 1% and cut it in half at a time when America's facing the deepest affordability crisis since the Great Depression. And Donald Trump is not only seeking to cut housing assistance in half, he's also seeking to impose a 2-year limit on the housing assistance he's cutting in half. And as you know, most heads of households in public housing and Section 8 are working people. These are not undeserving poor people who are gaming the system. These are working people, like my mother, who cannot afford market rate rent. The median rent in New York City is upward of $3,000. How many, can you raise your hand if you know many working people who can afford $3,000 a month? Median rent in Brooklyn is around $4,000. Median rent in Manhattan is $4,000 to $5,000. So if you impose a 2-year limit on rental assistance, what do you think will happen to the working people who live in HUD-assisted housing? Mr. Fleu, do you want to take a guess as to what will happen?
A lot of people would lose their homes.
Right, so instead of the working poor, we would have the working homeless. And so the policy choice before us is not a choice between the cost of housing and no cost at all. It is the choice between the cost of housing and the cost of homelessness. Mr. Fleu, which is more expensive, both economically and socially, housing or homelessness?
Congressman, I firmly believe that homelessness is more expensive.
By orders of magnitude, right? So in Donald Trump's America, if you're a working class person, you might lose your public housing or Section 8, causing you to pay more for housing. You might lose your SNAP, cause you to pay more for food. You might lose your Medicaid, cause you to pay more out of pocket for health care. And you're not only paying more for food and housing and health care, but you're also paying more for everyday goods and services because of the Trump tariffs, which, by the way, is raising the cost of housing. So again, I'm all for housing innovation, but housing investment is indispensable to addressing the affordability crisis in America. Does anyone disagree with anything I just said? See, there's a consensus. There's bipartisanship in America. So. Modular construction, to what extent can modular construction cut the cost of construction? Do we have estimates on time savings, cost savings?
Just from experience, for us, it's between 10 and 20%.
Okay. And is that national or is that in particular places?
I can only speak for what we're experiencing in Colorado.
Got it. Okay. So look, I feel like it's not either or. We need more innovation and more investment, and I hope we can build a bipartisan consensus for both. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Timmons, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. The U.S. housing market has long faced a significant supply gap, particularly for low and moderate income families. While traditional site-built homes have largely dominated, innovative solutions like manufactured, modular, and 3D printed homes present a promising path to expand affordable housing options. I'm always fascinated by how technology can be harnessed to solve some of our country's most pressing challenges. To address the growing housing shortage, it is crucial that Congress explore out-of-the-box solutions, including emerging technologies to ensure that all Americans have access to safe, affordable housing. Dr. McCoy, 3D printed homes represent a significant technological innovation in the housing industry. How do you believe this technology can revolutionize the way we approach home construction, especially in terms of affordability and efficiency?
Thank you for the question. Do you mind just repeating the very end of that? Because when the door opened, I missed it.
How do you believe this technology can revolutionize the way we approach home
3D printing.
construction, especially in terms of affordability and efficiency?
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. So we've been doing a lot of 3D printing. It speeds up the process. It's very customizable. It also can augment current processes that we see. So we have different parts of the home that it can augment that. But also what we're really looking at is how do we modernize the construction workforce so they understand how to work with machines as well. And I think that's something that we've seen in modular and manufacturing that they've already started to attempt to understand. We need to understand how we can modernize our workforce in the process. So I'm not sure I'm exactly answering your question, but there are a lot of different options that we
Let me ask it a different way. So permitting and regulation are a huge challenge, timing and getting all your subs in order and getting the inspectors out and all that stuff. When a computer is doing it, when it's predetermined, I would imagine that that time and the lack of necessarily inspections and permitting, there's not a lot of variables in subcontractors. You don't need to say, is the framing right if a computer's doing it? Would that be a huge benefit to the construction process?
Well, yes, it would if we can get there, right? So right now we have different authorities holding jurisdiction that we need to educate, and so we need to have processes that can streamline those processes, make sure that we agree to their safety and and quality, and then I think we can move forward.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Schaefer, understanding that only a few hundred 3D printed homes were built last year, how long do you believe it will take before this technology can realistically scale up and begin making a meaningful impact on our nation's housing crisis?
Thank you for the question again. This is not my area of expertise. The one thing I will say about 3D printing, I think it's in the early stages, right? So we have 18 stations in our factory. A 3D printer would only help with stations 1 and 2. So this is an emerging possibility, and the hope is that it will be one piece of the puzzle in the future.
Sure, thank you. Dr. McCoy, across the world, are other countries further advanced than we are in adopting 3D printing?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you for the question. They are moving forward quickly, and so we are doing what we can to keep up. Mostly, the work has been done in 3D concrete printing when it comes to buildings. We do have some polymer-based printing, but typically that's not for the entire building, right, for the walls and the structure. So a lot of the work we've been doing has been in trying to understand new materials for this process, understand how the code systems would work, code processes would work, how we can integrate with existing processes as well.
Sure, thank you for that. I want to shift attention to another innovative solution in housing that Chairman Flood discussed earlier, single-section cross-mod homes. These homes combine the efficiency and speed of modern manufactured housing with the look and features of traditional site-built homes, such as higher roof pitches, front porches, and permanent foundations. Cross-mod homes finance and appraise like site-built homes, and according to FHFA House Price Index, they have appreciated at rates similar to traditional homes since 2020. This innovation presents a real opportunity to increase attainable single-family housing without sacrificing quality or long-term value. Mr. Boor, can you discuss how this innovation can help expand home ownership opportunities for a broader range of Americans, particularly in terms of affordability, financing, and long-term value retention?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the challenge of having anything that you would call priced in a starter home category. I think cross-mod homes are really the thing that can fill in that void because it's so much less expensive, and yet the quality and aesthetics are comparable with what people would expect from a site-built home, starter home. So it's really filling a gap that the home builders are vacating by not being able to hit those price points.
Sure, thank you for that. Mr. Chairman, I'm out of time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Garcia, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for bringing attention to the housing crisis. You know, I think we can all agree that there is a housing crisis, not just in some states, but throughout America. And I know, Mr. Chairman, we had another subcommittee hearing where we had the head of the home builders here, and he responded to some questions I had specifically that I have today for Mr. Boor and Mr. Schaefer, who are the for-profit builders here. What impact will the tariffs have on your construction? I know you, Mr. Boor, you were asked that question by Mr. Torres, but you kind of hedged there a little bit. So specifically, and I'll need us a percent, I don't need a whole explanation for it. What percent do you anticipate the increased cost in your building due to the tariffs?
Yeah, I think I was volunteered to go first on this one.
I asked you first, so yes.
Okay.
And I just need a number. I don't need an explanation.
Well, the difficulty is that the tariffs keep moving on us, as you know. So
Well,
there's a lot
that's
of
part of
uncertainty
the problem
in
with
this.
the
Right,
Trump tariffs is that
on our
they're
cost structure,
unpredictable, and it's one thing today and another thing tomorrow.
Yeah.
But today, what is the impact?
in our cost structure, I would tell you it would be in the low single digits on the cost side.
What number, sir?
I don't have a specific number, below 5%.
I'm sorry?
Below 5% based on
Below
the tariffs.
5%?
Based on the tariffs that exist today.
All right. Do you use some steel products, do you not?
Yes.
Because those comes from Canada, and I know that was a big concern for the home builders, the lumber and the steel products from Canada.
Yes, and I believe those have been reversed back to the pre-existing tariffs.
Well, they're on pause because of the NAFTA, but they'll come back,
Correct.
trust me.
Correct.
What about the modular homes, Mr. Schaefer?
Yeah, so our homes, thank you for the question, are built with lumber, so that would be the one that we would be watching. So
And what percent would that be, sir? I just need a number.
5%.
5%? Well, would it surprise both of you that the home builder said about 25 to 40%, just tariffs? Now, you also use a lot of labor, and there will be a shortage of labor with the increased deportations and immigration enforcement. What percent would that impact you? And Mr. Schaefer, you'll go first this time.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, we have not had a shortage of labor. We have about 110
I just need a
folks
number,
in our
sir.
factory. Zero.
Zero? You will have no impact.
No impact.
You have all the workers in the world.
Correct.
That's very nice. You're probably the only sector I've ever talked to that has responded in that way. And Mr. Boor?
Yeah, I'd appreciate 1 minute to just talk that the one thing about the difference you're hearing
Sure,
from
I
the
just
home,
need a number because I've only
I
got
would
2
agree
more
with the
minutes left.
0% on labor because we're hiring unskilled labor and we're training it.
So the terrorists don't impact you much, immigration, none at all?
We have not seen an impact on labor
Well, would it
availability.
surprise you to know that the home builders said 30% based on immigration deportations? And
Yeah,
that
and
was-
what I wanted to point out is
Well,
that
sir, I
our
didn't ask you
process
a
is,
question. Let me move on. Sir, I want to go to Mr. Fleu, and Mr. Fleu, thank you for your work. I was a legal aid lawyer myself, and my favorite T-shirt was one that said, "Housing for profits, for people, not for profits." I was in the housing section. I used to have it until I had this horrible accident in Mexico, and my van blew up and everything in it, so I lost a T-shirt. But I wanted to ask you a question about extreme heat, hurricane events, weather events, and the risk to manufactured homes. So can you talk just a little bit about that? I'm from Houston. We have a lot of hurricanes, and we always just see, we don't have that many manufactured homes in Houston, but there are pockets around Houston that are semi-rural that do.
Thank you for the question. I can speak to the issue briefly. As everyone knows, these homes that we're talking about that are on non-permanent foundations on piers are secured primarily through the hurricane straps, metal strapping, ultimately secured to the ground by like a large screw. And what we see, not just in high wind events, but in high water events, we see a lot of flash flooding events in West Virginia. There's been a lot of news about the storms that hit North Carolina and the issues that they've had with the homes. But the other thing that I would like to mention, and maybe I'm dealing with mainly older homes, but when these homes become waterlogged, when they suffer from a natural disaster event, it's not like you call in ServPro and they vacuum out your basement. These homes suffer for the rest of their existence through mold issues, from other deterioration, and I think it's a very important issue that you've identified.
Right, so it would be a mistake to dismantle or do away with FEMA.
It would be a mistake.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. De La Cruz, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I am from deep South Texas, the tip of Texas. It's a largely Hispanic community and a community that has a humble average income for families. So low cost in housing is something very, very important to me. Affordability is important to me. And I'm excited that the work that we're doing here in this committee is to find meaningful solutions to end the housing crisis. I'm especially interested in ending homelessness for veterans as well, and this is why I'm proud to have a bill that helps address this for disabled veterans, which is H.R. 225, Disabled Veterans Housing Support Act. And as I said, it passed successfully out of the House and will, God willing, pass out of the Senate as well. That being said, when we worked on this bill, what we found was that there are simple legislation changes that can be made, that can be bipartisan and make tremendous impact on a community, in this case, veterans. And while I was listening to her discussion today, I realize how important manufactured homes are to solving affordability and housing in our nation, especially given all the advancement in construction. 3D printing, 3D building is very interesting. Quality, making sure that it's quality. Texas is home to the most total shipments of manufactured homes. And while manufactured homes are less expensive, they've seen a percentage cost increase, much like our standard brick homes. Mr. Boor, what do you think are key federal changes that we can make to reduce the price of manufactured housing for Texans and for all Americans?
Yeah, the price that matters to the people you're talking about is their monthly cost. And there are some very clear actions to be taken on the financing side, directing the GSEs in particular and FHA to develop programs they've talked about for a long time for home-only financing. I'd imagine in your area, I know because we're in those markets, that there are a lot of people there that are buying home-only, and they need that kind of loan. The GSEs really don't support that at all. And if they did, the cost of those loans would come down, and the monthly cost, which matters to those people, would be reduced. A lot of people are right on the outside of affordability, and that makes a big difference.
So GSEs, you said they don't support the manufactured home buyer?
No. Under their duty to serve programs, they've talked about pilot programs and other efforts to get into this section or segment, and yet we've really seen very little activity. So it would be a huge impact on people being able to get in. There are so many people just outside of affordability. If you get that efficiency, that secondary market for home-only loans, their monthly cost comes down and they can afford it.
And you said they were developing programs. Is this something is it a funding issue for them? Why do you think that GSEs have not supported manufactured housing?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to speculate on the reasons. I think it's a small market for them. And I think that, what they would tell you is they don't have data about the risk reward, but in the public market with investors, they are pretty attracted to the risk reward. But I think a secondary market would bring that interest rate down and, again, have a huge impact on the number of families that could afford a home.
That's been very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that. I know I don't have very much time left, but we talked about financing. I'm very curious about the 3D building. So I'll just ask Mr. McCoy or Mr. Schaefer about the 3D building and modernizing workforce, you said, is very important to make sure that we have the workforce that'll be able to produce this. Can you speak briefly to this?
Thank you for the question. Yes, this is a critical aspect, is getting more workers into this industry. Right now, we have a labor shortage, considerable. I've heard today that maybe that might not be in the factories, and so we're seeing that definitely in construction sites and across the industry in many different ways. So getting more people excited, changing the perception of this industry, I think it will go a long way. And then talking to younger generations about how exciting all the different opportunities are, the different technologies that we're working with, it will go a long way to making this a great economy-building industry. Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from Georgia, Ms. Williams, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Flood and Ranking Member Cleaver, and to all of our witnesses for having this discussion today, because y'all, I understand that manufactured housing can be an important tool in our toolkit to help ensure that everyone, no matter their zip code, has a roof over their head. In fact, I've benefited from this. So, see, I grew up in rural Alabama, and I grew up in a home that had no indoor plumbing and no running water. So I remember when my Aunt Pat purchased a manufactured home, and it was the first home that I lived in that had indoor plumbing and running water. But I now live in downtown Atlanta, y'all. And so I represent a district that this just isn't possible. I listen to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and I can tell that this hearing, while it would benefit many of my relatives, many people that I grew up with in rural Alabama, it wouldn't do anything for most of the constituents that I represent in the heart of the city of Atlanta. And because there's simply no place that the people of Atlanta can have a manufactured home. But y'all, they need housing too, because we have all agreed that affordable housing is a crisis in this country. So my constituents have been quite vocal about this one-size-fits-all solution that is being forced on them, and I'm their voice in Congress, so I have an obligation to speak up on their behalf. They're begging my colleagues to not gut HUD. They're begging my colleagues to not get rid of affordable housing programs, and they're asking for us to do something that will benefit so many Americans that are struggling, to meet them where they are and deal with Trump and his administration's skyrocketing housing costs. Because here's the truth of the matter, y'all. While this convo today would help a small segment of the country, my constituents would be left behind and still struggling. Why else would my Republican colleagues focus this week on kicking people off of health care, raising costs with reckless tariffs, or gutting SNAP benefits for the most vulnerable families? And y'all, this too is personal for me, because I benefited from SNAP growing up. Well, it was called food stamps at the time when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, when I was raised by my grandparents. But I wouldn't be here in Congress today serving the people that I represent if the Trump administration and my colleagues had their way with a lot of the policies that we're forcing on the American people today. So, what I know is that we have a job to do. And if my colleagues really care about affordable housing for all Americans, they will work with us to ensure that housing is affordable for the lowest income families. Mr. Boor, this is a very simple question. Don't need all the details and background. My Republican colleagues say they want to make manufactured homes and homes in general cheaper, which is a noble idea. But President Trump is putting tariff taxes on steel and aluminum coming from some of our biggest trade partners like Canada and Mexico. That's the stuff that we build homes with, y'all. Mr. Boor, simple question. Will Trump's tariff taxes make prices for new homes increase or decrease? Increase or decrease, Mr. Boor?
We talked earlier, it's probably
Just increase or decrease, Mr. Boor?
Price increase.
Increase, that's right. Mr. Boor, recent data from home builders shows that Trump's tariff taxes are adding almost $11,000 to the cost of an average home. But the good news is, y'all, is that I actually have solutions to bring costs down. In fact, a few weeks back in a committee markup, I offered an amendment that will increase funding for the Community Block Grant and Home Investment Partnerships programs. These programs are lifelines used to help states and local communities to preserve and rehabilitate homes in low-income communities. Unfortunately, my Republican colleagues all voted against it. And President Trump has proposed eliminating these programs entirely. As if an $11,000 tax increase wasn't enough for struggling families, my Republican colleagues, y'all, they just want to keep it going. Mr. Fleu, if Republicans got their way and eliminated these programs, what would happen to the average price of affordable housing across the country?
Thank you, Congresswoman. First of all, I'm here in a nonpartisan capacity, but to answer your question, they would soar.
But the facts are the facts, Mr. Fleu, and you're right, they would soar. But now, it's not gonna solve everything, y'all. But if Republicans are serious about making manufactured homes part of the solution, which they absolutely should be, we need to make sure that these homes are built to last and insured. Just last year, my district was hit with 2 hurricanes, and I live in Atlanta, y'all. We are not even coastal. There's nothing costlier than a damaged home that can't be repaired. And Mr. Fleu, my time is up, but I have more questions for all of our witnesses that I will submit for the record, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Salazar, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Flood, for putting together this very important and interesting hearing. And my first question is for any of you who would like to answer. My name is Maria Salazar. I represent the city of Miami. Miami is now in fashion. Everyone wants to move to Miami. There are tall, pretty, nice, expensive buildings being bought by the New Yorkers. But the problem is that one of the biggest issues facing the constituent, the regular Miami resident, is housing costs. I've never really understood why this is. When I've spoken with the developers, they say that the land is too expensive and they cannot buy the land and then make their money because they are in the private sector, not like us, that we are in the public one serving the public. So the modular homes, do you think that maybe that could help this problem? Because I'm talking about the land costs, but then you have to put on top of that the construction expense. So any of you that would like to tell me, give me some hope about Miami and the overall housing costs coming down. Who's familiar with Florida?
I'll take a swing. Yeah, I think the land cost issue is somewhat of a given, and so what you've got to look for is density. I mean, this whole problem is a supply-side problem. This is not about throwing money at higher cost homes. It's about supply, and so if we can get more housing units on that expensive land, then we win, right? More supply, and so I think the pessimism about what manufactured housing can do in urban environments is unwarranted. We've innovated with duplexes and other solutions that get more units on the same piece of land. So I think it's a supply problem, and that's the solution.
All right, any other comments? Any suggestions, if you would be talking right now to one of the developers that do want to provide what you just explained, what would you say to them?
Well, first I'd talk about density, but I'd also point out that order of magnitude, the cost of placing our units is about 30% less than the cost of a site built. And so if they want to lower their costs to try to hit affordable price points, density and manufactured solutions.
So that would entail to change the zoning laws as well?
Correct.
With the
Change the zoning and allow us to innovate with products that fit in those environments.
And what about this other idea that I was hearing about, the accessory dwelling units, which are similar to little efficiencies? Could you explain a little bit more? 'Cause
Yeah,
we have
that's
so many-
it's like creating land. This is not something an economist.
Creating what again?
Excuse me?
Creating
land is what I would say. And
Oh,
that's not
creating land.
That's not a concept that an economist would agree with me on, but people have backyards that are available, and if they can put a rental or a mother-in-law type unit in the backyard, you've placed another unit in a dense area, which grows the supply and lowers the cost of housing.
Sure, and then why isn't that happening more often in Florida? Do you have any idea?
I think they're slow to take it up. I think if you looked at LA as an example, LA has really grabbed onto this idea and removed the barriers.
Could you just give me a picture of what the accessory dwelling unit looks like?
Yeah, they're typically much smaller. What we see a lot in LA County that I've used as an example is people leveling their garage, and on that footprint, detached garage, on that footprint, putting, a 400 to 500 self-contained living unit. And
All
that
right,
can
with
be
a
rented.
kitchen and a bathroom, everything that a little
Everything.
home entails.
And that unit can be rented to the school teachers and the nurses and the fire people that can't afford to live in those areas that they serve. And now, again, you've lowered the incremental cost of rent and increased housing supply.
And how much does a 500 square feet unit, accessory dwelling unit may cost?
Basic one might be, and I'm winging it here, but basic one might be $50,000 to $60,000, and they can be as nice as you want to make them.
Wow. Great. How do we access that? Give me two.
How do we, how do you get?
Meaning it's, I think it's a very innovative idea. I had not heard about it, but I would definitely would like to know more so we can share this new concept with the rest of the developers that are desperate.
We're developing the case studies in some municipalities. It's a great solution.
Thank you. Okay, I yield back. Thanks.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Tlaib, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We know that when private equity firms purchased manufacturing housing communities, residents can face new regulations, as we know, higher rents and even displacement or eviction. In Michigan, 1 in 10 manufacturing housing communities are owned by private equity firms. Private equity firms have purchased manufactured housing communities in my own district called Crestwood Estates, and Dearborn Heights is one of them. And one of the residents in Crestwood Estates had reached out. She's a seasoned resident. In March, she called us, reached out, and after her community was purchased by a private equity firm, her rent went up 65%. That's before the water, sewage, trash, and other fees were added on. She told me that some of her neighbors have lived there for 20 or 30 years, but now most of us can't even afford to live here anymore, and they have no place to go. Mr. Fleu, in your testimony, you noted that residents of manufactured housing communities are overwhelmingly people on fixed income, like my resident that I mentioned. Can you touch base on many of our seasoned residents? And ironically, for some reason, a lot of my veteran neighbors really like living in manufactured home communities, as you probably know. And we have a lot of residents living with disabilities on fixed income that also, in particular, face financial disruptions and so forth. So, can you talk a little bit about what those impacts look like post private equity firms buying out these manufactured communities?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. What those impacts look like are frankly pitiful. You see people that have lived in communities for decades, as you've mentioned, that find themselves homeless. You find people that have lived in communities for decades that start having all kinds of health issues because of the stress that this increased rent has put on them. Mm-hmm. You find people that have enjoyed community for years and interacted with their neighbors that no longer feel that sense of community because people have left, the conditions have deteriorated, et cetera. If I may, I would suggest that one of the issues with private equity would be providing incentives for sellers to sell to residents and incentives for residents to purchase their own communities and convert them.
I love that. We actually been talking about it. So for people listening to this committee, I know we're not the most popular committee today, but one of the things we've been talking about on our team is the resident-owned communities, of having kind of a approach of resident-owned, having the homeowner have a share in the governing of it, the oversight and so forth, and having some way to even vote on some of the conditions of the facility. And I'm glad you mentioned, so if you can talk about the benefits, and again, this is new to many people in the public, called resident-owned communities a little bit. I know in the past you've heard, and I know ranking members heard, cooperatives, structured as cooperatives and things like that. But can you, if my mom or your mom was in this room, how would you explain that and the benefits of it?
Sure. It's the difference between an apartment building and a condo.
That's right.
By allowing residents to actually purchase the communities they live in, the homes are better upkept, the conditions in the communities themselves are generally more improved, upkept, the upkeep is improved. But like you say, it gives an ownership. It gives basically a real piece of land that goes with the home, and it allows people to have that pride of ownership and to have that asset that they do not have when they only own the home, but they're basically powerless with regards to decisions.
In your
made about
testimony,
the
you actually mentioned abusive financial practices faced by purchasers of manufactured homes. And I know in the past, CFPB had exposed those practices and pursued bad actors. However, I know the current administration's not interested in doing that. In my opinion, I don't see that being something of a commitment. Does the weakening of consumer protections mean that borrowers like my constituent seeking to purchase, that they're exposed to some of these fraudulent schemes?
Absolutely. And the weakening of consumer protections is a snowball effect. One bad actor breeds another, bad actor breeds another.
Yeah. Mr. Fleu, you should have seen, and I don't know, Chairman, I should have brought the article. One of our manufactured homes owned by a private equity firm, they just had no water access because he didn't pay it. The management company, I mean, it's a private equity firm, but they had that one person, he didn't pay it. They didn't have water. I don't know, I just feel like these are some of our most vulnerable and we should do more. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Boor, did I hear you right when I first walked in? You said one of the answers to the housing shortage is to move your mother-in-law out in the backyard? Build her a separate place, or how would that work? Who's going to deliver that message, too, is what I would... The Next Generation Housing Initiative in Washington County, Wisconsin, is a locally driven effort to expand affordable homeownership for middle-income families by developing 1,000 new owner-occupied homes by 2032. It's backed by $10 million in county investment. The program provides infrastructure, subsidies to developers, and down payment assistance to buyers, up to $20,000 per home. It sets clear affordability targets, requiring 40% of homes to be sold under $340,000 and all under $420,000. So obviously what we're focused on is reducing the development costs, expanding housing options, and the initiative also promotes zoning reforms that allow for smaller lots and diverse housing types like duplexes and townhouses. It is an example of a public-private advisory group that can not only implement this, but oversee this. So, Mr. Schaefer, I think you're familiar with the concept. I'm going to ask you, from your vantage point and working closely with developers and local governments and nonprofits, I know you've seen a lot of changes to the and maneuvering on some of those challenges to building affordability. So have you seen programs similar to this throughout the nation starting to develop? Or do you think this something similar could be kind of scaled down maybe and used at the federal level? I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Thank you for your question. And what you just described is basically what we've been doing throughout the state of Colorado. So it is municipalities and the state tackling this missing middle, so 80 to 120% of the AMI, which you described on this particular project. So yes, higher density townhomes are a part of it. Could be duplexes up to 4 or 5 or 6 plexes, and then the public-private partnership piece, or you could add philanthropic as well into that piece, which it sounds like you're doing. So these are going on throughout all the mountain towns and really throughout the state of Colorado. Very similar to what you did, so you hit on all the main points. The only one that I might add is, again, you are focusing on the demand side. The one piece we are challenging folks to is to look at the supply side. So building one factory in the state of Wisconsin could provide 500 affordable homes per year. With everything that you just mentioned in this initiative, we would just want to add that to it.
Very good. Thank you so much. Mr. Boor, government mandated caps and regulations on single-family rentals reduce the supply of housing. It's kind of been discussed, I know, this morning. But studies have shown minimum lot size requirements, restrictions on multifamily housing developments and the lengthy permitting process, which we've, if you're a member of Congress, you hear every time you're in the district and you talk to somebody that's a builder themselves. So do you believe that there's an increase in the number of single-family rental homes that are available? And how could this improve overall housing affordability, I guess? What's the effect on the pricing?
Yeah, there's a huge need for rental solutions as well. And I think the challenge, and this relates to your earlier question, the challenge is not only on the financing and funding side, it's also getting entitlement to do these expansions. Communities, whether they're rental or land lease, provide homes for a lot of people in this country, and they're very satisfied with their living situation. And then to further your point, I think some of the low or lot size requirements is one form of zoning restriction that keeps manufactured housing out of urban developments. We have not even cracked the opportunity of infill with factory-built housing, and it's because of those kinds of restrictions that you're mentioning.
Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Bynum, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Fleu, in my home state of Oregon, I've noticed how private equity firms have significantly increased investments in manufactured housing communities. And so from your work, have you seen any impact on the cost to renters when entire manufactured housing communities are purchased on a systematic scale? And one point to note, we in the state have suffered from extraordinary wildfire events, and so many families rely on the accessibility of being able to move into a manufactured housing community pretty quickly. So that's why this is really important to us.
Thank you for the question. As explained a little further in my written testimony that was submitted, I've never seen private equity or a hedge fund buy a manufactured housing community and not increase rents as the first thing they do. Unfortunately, that's often coupled with a decrease in investment in the community, allowing infrastructure to deteriorate and living conditions to worsen.
My second question for you, manufactured housing is the largest source of unsubsidized affordable housing stock, and it represents an essential source of affordable housing, particularly for seniors. I remember going door to door one time, and seniors were pretty upset because a row of the homes had been condemned because they were noted by the county as being very close to falling into the river. And that was, of course, a challenge for them. And I asked them if there was a replacement, and they said no. So that was particularly stressing for them. So from your perspective, what specific risks come from the aggressive purchasing of manufactured housing communities, particularly to vulnerable populations like seniors, veterans, low-income families? And what actions from a policy standpoint do you think Congress should take to mitigate these risks? And one more quick point on this. When I asked a question earlier in a committee about capital, the response was that we should be agnostic to the type of capital that comes in to do a particular job. Okay, that's fair. That was in respect to young people being able to buy their first home. I think what the challenge now is that we have a legislative opportunity here. We have a policy decision to make, irrespective of the money, but what should we be doing? What should we be thinking about to make that policy decision?
Thank you. I will answer that last question, but to sort of go back to the first question, when you have people in fixed incomes, when you have vulnerable communities, low-income communities, the MHI, they released a study that says the average increase year over year in manufactured housing communities, land-leased communities, 6.5%, I believe. The COLA last year, or for this year, is 2.5%. So there's just no way that someone that's on fixed benefits can keep up and keep a roof over their head. Answering your last question, I think that the government can incentivize. I think, again, we're all talking about the need for further expansion of GSE-backed loans, but I think part and parcel of that expansion must come with rules from those GSEs that require certain treatment, certain benefits to the residents of these communities.
Thank you. I guess in closing, Mr. Fleu, thank you for your testimony. I'm really concerned about threats to affordable housing that could create these conditions where seniors are pushed out of their communities and veterans on fixed incomes, as you've just mentioned, are hit with rent hikes that they can't afford. And I think that this is happening without transparency, and Congress needs to provide some level of guardrails so that we shore up the market, make sure that it continues to be there, and especially as we try to replace housing in areas where wildfires have really hit home. So I'm committed to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to ensure that we get a safe, affordable, and steady housing stock. So I don't think our homes should be necessarily an opportunity for just an outright profit. It is a source of, intergenerational wealth for many families, just keeping a roof over their head. But I think this is more about dignity and opportunity for families. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from California, Mr. Liccardo, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me to wave on. I'd like to think I'm becoming an honorary member of the subcommittee. Thank you, and I appreciate your willingness to hold this important meeting because innovation in the housing industry is critical. I think I've certainly seen that in my time as a mayor in the city of San Jose. We actually have more mobile home residents than any other city in the country. And we relied heavily on prefabricated modular housing for many solutions, and frankly, we need much more. I do share Mr. Torres' view, though, that the public is being presented with a false choice between innovation and sensible housing safety net programs. And we desperately need both. We do need innovation, construction, development. We also know that the actions that are even been taken or being contemplated to decimate Section 8, for example, requiring 2-year limitations, for example, cutting already thousands of families off program. Section 8 already fails to serve about 3/4 of American families that qualify for it by income. And so the devastation we're going to see from the cuts there and that and other similar programs, the tariffs on Canadian lumber and Chinese steel, none of these are making our efforts to combat the housing crisis any easier. And my concern is that as millions of Americans will suffer from both these cuts and poor economic strategies, we're going to see more people pushed out in the street. And communities are going to take a generation to recover because we know that arsonists can move much faster than home builders can. And so I would urge Congress to move carefully, very carefully, and dismantling these critical safety net programs. I want to get to the heart here of what we're discussing here today. And I certainly saw the benefits of prefabricated modular housing, particularly with regard to ADUs, backyard homes. We created programs partnering with manufactured home builders, identifying a couple dozen pre-approved floor plans so that our planning department could enable homeowners to get a permit in a single day by going online and choosing one of the pre-approved plans. We saw the permits for ADUs, backyard homes, skyrocket from about 15 a year back in 2015 to more than 800 by 2019. Huge opportunities. The problem was the homeowners got the permits, but what we were told over and over is that many of them weren't getting shovels in the ground because they couldn't get the financing. For modest income homeowners, there's just no simple tools to enable them, if they don't have enough equity in their homes, to be able to expand housing in their own neighborhoods, where we know there's great opportunity for many cities like San Jose that want to provide that opportunity. We're working on a bill now, and I certainly welcome my colleagues who may be interested in this to provide that opportunity, essentially through a mandate to FHA. But I'd welcome any of our witnesses as to any opinions that you might have about what opportunities there are for innovation in financing, particularly with Fannie or Freddie-backed lending, that could actually unlock this great opportunity we have with land in lots of cities throughout this country. We have ample land and not enough housing.
I'll jump in. I think you're right on the point. I mean, what we've seen, whether it's ADUs or duplexes, any of these solutions that can help, particularly in more urban environments, is that the physical product innovation happens first, and it sometimes takes a long time for the financing to catch up with it. And I do think there's some direction that could be given to the government entities, FHA, Freddie, and Fannie, to accelerate development of those programs. In some cases, I'll tell you, like duplexes is an example. I get in discussions and they talk about the problems and what they don't know, and then I say, well, do you fund site-built duplexes? And right away they say, oh yeah, we do that. What is the difference? These homes are not going to move. They're built to the same quality, but there seems to be a difficulty of just jumping over the mindset that somehow manufactured housing should be treated differently in financing. And I think you guys can encourage those entities to think differently and move.
Thank you. I agree. We're going to push. I would point out, and Mr. Boor, I appreciate your comments, and I agree very much with your suggestion about the need for preemptive approaches around antiquated restrictions, around chassis requirements, and so forth. And I would support some preemption. But I'm very concerned about preemption and safety requirements. And I know your own company faced those very challenges, as I understand, as recently as last year, with a $270,000 fine that was considered from Department of Labor regarding safety. We do need minimum requirements around safety on construction and on occupation. I hope you agree.
And you're talking about factory safety.
That's right.
Yeah, very proud of our record there. We're well below the industry average, but it's very important. I wouldn't disagree with you at all.
All right. Well, I'm concerned because I know Cavco has certainly had its challenges.
Gentleman's
and
time
we
has
certainly
expired.
don't want to replicate that. Thank you very much.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Montana, Mr. Downing, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Flood. Montana, between 2018, 2013, has seen just staggering increase in the median home values. It went almost 90% to 89.6%. And during that same time, median household income increased by about 28%. So on one hand, you've got almost 90% increase in cost or value, and you've got less than a 30% in income. Obviously, those numbers are not tracking. And the median home price in Livingston, Montana, $640,000, or in Helena, $600,000. And something I think about often is the American dream. Home ownership, to me, is foundational. It's a cornerstone to the American dream. So how do we solve this problem? Obviously, we need to figure out ways of getting people into homes, finding it cheaper. And I've said this statistic on this committee before, but I think this was from the home builders who estimate that every $1,000 extra that it costs to build a home, you're eliminating about 106,000 possible people that can buy that home. So we need to find solutions here. So I'm going to first turn to innovation. I was a tech entrepreneur, and I am a firm believer that the United States needs to embrace and lead in innovation. Innovative solutions increase efficiencies, make products more affordable to everyone, so I'm excited about the idea of 3D printed homes. I'm excited about this. So I'm going to start with Mr. McCoy. You already spoke earlier today about the potential benefits of 3D printing technologies. Are there any other possible innovative solutions to increase the supply of affordable housing that might not even be on our radar right now?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I think if you look at artificial intelligence right now, we have a lot of opportunities to take antiquated records, permitting processes, planning processes. We can look at a lot of the different systems we're currently using, and we can work towards more efficient processes in that. That could speed up our construction and scheduling, of course, and hopefully allow us to produce more units faster.
Thank you.
So that's one area.
I'm going to move on to energy. I'm all for energy efficiency. I live in Montana. Energy efficiency is important. But this can be for Mr. Boor. So what impact does the imposition of federal energy codes by the Department of Energy have on the cost and availability of manufactured housing in America?
Yeah, that attempted rulemaking, because it was somewhat ill-advised and out of sequence with how we manufacture and transport homes, it was poorly targeted. And we've estimated that there's a lot of variation in this estimate, but $5,000 to $6,000 of added cost for the consumer. Our industry has come forward and said we can get similar efficiency improvements in ways that work for us, and it wouldn't drive that cost. And that's the importance of the HUD process.
Well, thank you. I'm going to move on to Mr. Schaefer. Some places completely prohibit manufactured homes. Do you notice any difference in housing affordability in areas that allow manufactured homes versus those that do not?
Thank you for the question. And again, we build modular homes, not manufactured homes. So I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer this, but again, for us, if the communities or the state allow for regional codes that allows us to build faster, quicker, more efficiently, very similar in Colorado as it is in Montana.
Thank you. Mr. Boor, do you agree, or do you have anything to add there?
Well, it's all about supply. I mean, your starting point about the relative increase of housing and incomes in Montana proves the point that what we need is supply. So turn us loose, give us a level playing field, and we'll increase the supply.
Well, I appreciate that. So you kind of building on that, can you talk about how prefabricated homes can increase the supply of affordable housing in rural areas where there's not much development? I'll go back to Mr. Boor.
Yeah, we traditionally have covered rural areas pretty effectively. I think the next frontier, and it's a big one, is to get into suburban and urban areas, and that's where a combination of product innovation and zoning improvements would allow us to do a big job.
So my last couple of seconds to anybody on the panel, anything, any other barriers that haven't been discussed today that prevent prefabricated homes from being utilized? It looks like I ran out of time, so I'm sorry to get that late. Mr. Chair, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the good gentleman from New York, saving the best for last. Mr. Garbarino is now recognized for 5 minutes.
I don't think I've ever been called the best before, but thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Recent data from the National Association of Realtors highlights a critical shortage of housing, particularly for first-time home buyers in the moderate income price range. First-time buyers decreased to 24% of the market share from last year, marking the lowest share since 1981. Dr. McCoy, how could innovative housing types like manufactured, modular, or 3D printed homes help address both the housing supply shortage and affordability challenges facing first-time homebuyers?
Thank you for the question. I think I said this before, but really I would advocate for a deep bench. We would have a lot of different tools that we can look at different segments of the market and be able to satisfy different parts of the market in different ways, or different local market conditions that we need to satisfy. I think that's part of what needs to happen, to understand that we have a lot of options, and if we can bring innovation, some innovation that needs to be brought back online, but also push innovation as much as possible, then hopefully we can have many different tools for many different options. One of the things that was mentioned before a couple times that we haven't really talked about is if we can satisfy a certain segment of the market, we don't have what's called a crowding out effect, where we might have people who are basically paying below what they can afford. And so you can actually open up areas for people to have more housing as a result in markets where you don't find that people can afford.
My colleague, just before, he was talking about how some municipalities and localities have put in prohibitions on these types of homes. What specific zoning reforms or incentives, Dr. McCoy, should localities consider to ensure these innovative housing solutions are fairly incorporated into local land use plans?
Well, in many ways I'm here to talk about technology, but I can reiterate some of what we've talked about and what we've seen in Virginia. We've seen a lot of really good programs that work on speeding up the processes around permitting. We've seen plan books where people can pick from a book of plans, and that really speeds up the process from a code standpoint. We also have seen a lot of state-level grants that try to incentivize innovation through our housing finance agency.
Any of the other witnesses want to take a stab at that? Any other ideas?
I talked in my testimony about strengthening a HUD's policy statement on this. Congress has been clear about the preemption authority of HUD, and they need to strengthen their policy statement so they can work with local communities to overcome really the outdated view of factory-built housing. And I think if we can push a little bit harder on the municipalities, we'll get more acceptance and it'll be success stories.
It was actually, my next question was about updating HUD policies, so that was great. Mr. Boor, Cavco was the first bill to unveil a duplex model after HUD code was updated to allow for zero lot line and 2 to 4 unit manufactured homes. Can you speak to how this innovation expands the range of homes built to the federal construction code and where you see duplexes fitting into the market and what barriers, if any, your company is encountering as you bring this product to scale?
Yeah, the early adopters, I mean, it's a fantastic change, and HUD supported us by changing their code to allow it. The early adopters really are community operators that intend to rent long-term because they can get commercial funding for the units. The hurdle seems to be to get consumer funding or owner funding. But I think the frontier that we want to get to is where these can be solutions for urban infill. It's a great solution there, and the big hurdle, again, is financing and developing programs where owners can get consumer financing for these units.
Wonderful, thank you. Since you already asked my last question, I yield back. Thank you very much.
The gentleman yields back. I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for your testimony today. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witness to the chair. The questions will be forwarded to the witnesses for their responses. Witnesses, please respond no later than June 20, 2025. This hearing is adjourned.